Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Very good choice. Mr Chairman, regarding Part 2, I firstly want to comment on Clause 7. As introduced, this provided that a victim may apply to a district court for a non-contact order in respect of a violent offender, and that an application may be made at any time after the offender was released from prison. The requirement that an application must be made after the release of an offender from prison was, of course, too late. I said at the first reading that the victim should be able to apply for an order at any time after the conviction, so that the court could make an order to have effect immediately as from the date of release. My concern then was that there was likely to be a significant delay between the victim learning of the offender's release and the making of an order and its service upon the offender, and that would potentially be a period of high risk for the victim. That issue, I'm glad to see, has been addressed by the Select Committee, and the amended section is now acceptable to New Zealand First. Regarding Clause 9, though, I am disappointed that this has not been amended in the manner that I had suggested at the first reading. The subsection says that the court may make a non-contact order if it is satisfied in subsection A that there are ongoing effects of the offending for the victim. But I question why the court would have to be satisfied that there are ongoing effects of the offending. What would the victim have to prove to satisfy that test? It would have been better, I think, for that subsection to be deleted altogether. Similarly, subsection B should also be deleted. It refers to the contact between the offender and the victim to possibly be detrimental to any of the ongoing effects referred to in subclause A, which I've just mentioned. It should not be necessary for a victim to have to prove those things. Subsections C and D, I believe, are sufficient by themselves. These provide that the order is reasonably necessary to avoid contact. And I think that that is really what the issue is, and that would be sufficient for the victim to have to establish. In my view, this is the only notable defect in the bill. And it is, as I've said, therefore a little bit disappointing that the amendments that I suggested weren't made, and nobody that I know of has come up with a good explanation about why ongoing effects will have to be proved, or why they have to be shown to be detrimental. It's sufficient that the order is reasonably necessary, and that's nice and wide and general and good enough for a victim to have to prove only that, in whatever the circumstances may be. Now, so I'm a bit disappointed that those amendments haven't been made, but it doesn't detract from the value of the bill as a whole. Concerning Clause 11, the clause sets out the effect of a non-contact order, now amended to temporary non-contact order, and it prohibits the offender against whom it is made from having any form of contact with the victim, as we know. In addition, the court may prohibit the offender from entering, living in, or working in a specified area. The concern that I had was that subclause 1C should be qualified by the addition of an exception as to the entry into an area that is incidental to or necessary for the purposes of the offender's employment. Although we need to make an order effective, we should also see that it does not unnecessarily cause problems for the offender in obtaining or maintaining their employment. Subsection 1C, I'm glad to see, has now been deleted, and instead we now have new section 11A entitled Effect of the Final Order, which is much more comprehensive and has more refined powers for the court to specify so that the effects of the order will be no more than needed to properly protect the victim. So I'm very glad to see that that has happened. Similarly, new section 11B is welcome, which deals with the need for a final order to be directed by the court to apply to specified other persons who the offender may encourage to engage in the contact behaviour with the offender. which the offender might engage in. So again, I'm glad to see that included. Lastly, concerning section 15, Mr Chairman.
Mr O'Rourke.
I suggested that at an earlier stage whether the court should be required in this section in considering whether a discharge of the order should be granted to consider some specified matters such as the record of the offender in complying with the order, the behaviour of the victim also, which may of course also justify a discharge, and obviously the places where the victim and the offender live permanently, amongst other things. I note that this section has now been deleted and replaced with much more comprehensive provisions in new section 15, and that an additional section 15A has been included to address the sorts of issues which I had suggested be looked at. So again, the amendments sought by New Zealand First have largely been included to our considerable satisfaction, and for those reasons, with the reservation I expressed earlier, New Zealand First will be happy to continue to support the bill as amended.
I recognise the Honourable